Hello, is this working? All right. Hello, folks. Good Friday evening, depending on where you are, from the McDowell kitchen. It's been a little bit since I've been around. I did a lot of field work in Tucson, and I'm still sort of sorting things out. And I've been spending the week doing some mapping of token engineering and understanding sort of crypto economics and how that works with blockchain and automated smart contract governance. So that's something that's been on my mind lately. And so tonight I wanted to share with you guys. I did an interview midweek with my friend Lynn, who's based in Texas, and we go way back. And she has a podcast called Social Impact Podcast, and it's usually audio, but I had some slides to share, so we ended up doing it as a video call, and I just edited in my slides this afternoon, and I thought I might share it with you guys as a live stream tonight. So it's a short one. It's only half an hour, but I think it's kind of short and punchy for people. So if you have friends who are like, I'm not listening to a 3-hour video, like perhaps this half-hour one will help. And the focus is really on this idea of school choice and the voucher programs and how that's going to play into the future of work and digital identity and social impact finance. So a lot packaged up in a half an hour. So I'm going to see if I can get this started. I haven't tried to sort of stream a pre-recorded video from a file before. The last time I did it on my desktop, and I think I had some annoying feedback there. So I'm going to try this and see how it works. So let's.
This is Social Impact. I'm your host, Lynn Davenport. I'm here with my friend, very good friend, Allison McDowell. And Allison runs Wrench in the Gears. That's her blog where she's been researching what started out as education research and then has morphed into what's happening with the future of work. And today we're going to be talking about the future of work and school choice. Welcome, Allison.
I'm glad to be here, Lynn.
Good to see you.
We go way back.
We go way back. And Alice and I we've taken a couple of road trips, a couple of tours of Utah and Austin, and we've had some fun together in Dallas, exploring what's happening in the biotech space and education. So welcome, and tell me what have you been working on lately, Allison?
There are a lot of discussions lately around school choice and what the future of school looks like, and tracking children in terms of their behaviors in school, and data privacy, and the shift to competency-based, mastery-based, proficiency-based learning. There are all of these things bubbling up, but I think the piece that's missing is what the future economy is, and the push towards recreating children as digital citizens that will be part of a global workforce that will be mediated by artificial intelligence based on all the little data points that are being collected on them in the classroom, both about what they know and about how they think and about what kind of team members they are. And so I put together a little bit of a presentation on, I called it the collective intelligence experiment. Is this freedom and choice? Meaning that really all of the stuff that we're doing in these digital spaces is intelligence, right? We show our intelligence, our cognitive intelligence, our emotional intelligence, and all of this is being hoovered up to create a simulation of us and then to make predictions about us as future citizens of the world and as future workers, as future human capital. And one of the things we've done a lot of work around is the fact that moving forward, global investors are going to start to be making bets on human capital. And this is something that I think, you know, we come from sort of different positionalities in the political ideology spectrum, but there's a lot of identity politics and culture war stuff going on. And I think one of the things that gets obscured is the fact that the future of work is remote, like not just remote platform work, but literally remote through robots. And it's task rabbit work. These are gig kinds of things. It's not stable. And I know a lot of your expertise has been counseling people who've been dislocated out of stable jobs and trying to find new pathways for them. But this is a slide from the Center for the Future of Museums with the American Association of Museums from 2014. Elizabeth Merritt, who is a futurist who was actually trained at the University of Houston Foresight Institute, she talks about the fact that the plan as of at least 2014 was to disassemble regular neighborhood schools and to break them down to train children for a TaskRabbit economy, an on-demand TaskRabbit economy of gigs. And that her positionality in this paper was that museums would take up the project-based learning side, because museums would be set up to do monitor hands-on learning, while most of this hybrid model would be through online platforms and like quote unquote personalized learning, that people would come in person or maybe even to remote virtual museums. And in that team setting, they would get additional data on the children. But all
Wait,
of it.
So I'm going to stop you for just a second, because in thinking about just drawing a local connection, is those who have been working on the Perot Museum, for example, in Dallas, that they have been setting up the same idea of the future of work and doing it through children in the public schools, and setting up this model which would make it would not necessarily have learning be in the classroom, it would be learning everywhere and learning
Exactly.
all throughout the community. Okay, so I just wanted to draw that local distinction for the listener. So, okay, keep going.
Yeah, and I would say both Philadelphia and Dallas have been part of this project that came out of the MacArthur Foundation called Collective Shift, and it's cities of LRNG. I guess that's a short for
Our
learning.
mayor, learning. Our mayor did that. Our previous mayor, Mayor Rawlings, did that with the City of Learning and the badges. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, city would be your classroom, which sounds kind of cool unless you realize that while you're learning in your alternative education environment, you're literally in the panopticon through QR code data being collected, through badges with metadata attached, potentially through, wearable technology, either measuring your emotional state or your activity states. And so while project-based learning, I think in many of the traditional education settings is sold as like a win-win, who wouldn't like project-based learning? Once you interface it with the fact that you're doing this in a digital surveillance system, potentially.
It was the group projects.
Yes.
Yeah. So project-based learning, where they'd say, oh, well, this is what the real world looks like. And so we need our kids to have those transferable skills while they're in the classroom to then take out and learn how to work with each other. But what we found is that it really was an agenda behind it to normalize this. Okay, go ahead.
Exactly. And so this is called out of school time learning or alternative learning. And they've really been bulking that up. Even as neighborhood schools are defunded, they've been expanding that. And what I would say is that people who have traditionally accessed things like museums or cultural institutions for homeschooling or unschooling, as soon as we get choice vouchers that are attached to data, all of those traditionally sort of open, unrestricted learning opportunities will then come under a new level of surveillance. And so
that would be why they're pushing the virtual learning, the Texas Virtual Learning Commission, which is meeting for their final meeting tomorrow. That's why. So I wanted to also draw that connection there, because that's why there's a big push for the virtual learning that will eventually tie into the school choice and the future of work, which Allison is talking about. So, okay, that makes sense.
So probably the voucher you get, if you get a voucher, it's not going to cover a private school tuition. It will most likely cover some sort of largely online hybrid model. And we've talked in the past about Stimuli as like the school is an online video game, because that's cheap. It has limited labor costs, it has limited overhead costs, and then you'll dabble around with work-based learning placements or going to museums or going to sports institutions for these additional badges that will get the social data on you, like what kind of team member you are. And having
you'll see, and you'll see that where the hybrid school in Dallas came to the Virtual Learning Commission to show what they're doing in Dallas with this metaverse campus that Allison is talking about, and you have an eyeball following the children and their avatar throughout this school within a video game. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So this has been a long time in coming. I would say this future that they're planning is not only online platform work, like call center work or online coding work. Literally, they're in the process of building remote robotics that are piloted by people in a different country. And so you put on a VR headset and these haptics, like the game controllers, and you would control a robot, and it sounds outlandish. Only the United Nations has papers about saying, well, we're really excited for the day that we can have Mexican landscapers mow lawns in Texas from Mexico. And we're really excited when we can have Kenyan house cleaners clean hotel rooms from Kenya in Norway. And so this future is already imagined, but these robots are still a bit clunky. This is Sanctuary AI that is based out of the Vancouver area. Suzanne Gildert has developed these. But look at the pitch, right? It is safer. It is efficient. It is sustainable, right? You don't have to go to work. Look, you might catch a cold if you go to work in your body. Just go to work in the robot. The robot never gets sick, right? And the robot.
And you don't have to expend any wasteful energy, and your carbon footprint will be less.
Yeah.
Well, you're at home, you won't get sick, and you'll be healthier, and the air will be cleaner.
Right. Efficient. That robot can work 24 hours a day with different pilots hopping in at different times, right? And then, but all of that is going to be decided by AI looking at your ledger, looking at your skill transcript to see who's the best candidate for this gig, which could just be a small amount of time, and then who is the most compliant. And to me, this idea that we're creating this future is actually very mentally challenging. Like to wrap your mind around that you're going to live through a robot is something I think it's profoundly inhuman. And so now we have to condition the children to acquiesce, this coming generation to acquiesce and submit their agency into this machine. And that's going to cause a lot of mental problems. So they really want to track who is someone who's going to be stable and reliable in this type of work, which I think
who will have the fortitude, who can endure, and then they'll offset with some of these programs that are more mental health driven, so that they can balance this, even though it is very unhealthy and harmful and isolating.
Exactly. And so I would say if people want more information on this, Richard Baldwin, he is an economist. He speaks about globalization 4.0 and globotics. So if you look up those keywords, Richard Baldwin and globalization 4.0, that is about the remote robotic labor with telepresence robots, and it's also very much linked to machine translation. So the hurdle that they have to get to is that if you're going to put a job out to a global workforce, that the language barrier be adjusted, whether that's happening through an augmented reality tablet that does automatic translation, but that's in process. Like that's moving very quickly to completion.
Okay, well, hold that thought. We're going to take a break. We'll come right back and talk more about it. Okay, we're back with Allison McDowell. We're talking about the future of work and how that ties in with education and the school choice movement. So you were talking about Richard, tell me his name again, Richard what? Baldwin, yes. Okay, so keep going with that.
Yeah,
whatever you want to talk
touched on sort of the skills you would have to put your mind in a robot and go to work every day, right? For a different job, you might have a gig for a week, a month. It's not you're not going to go work for a company for 20 years and have the stability like we had or our parents had. So within this, monitoring mental health is really important. And I was just reminded recently of a paper we saw early on from 2016 that was talking a DSM, like a diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders for achievement. So in this online mastery transcript, the blockchain ledger, you will have all of these skills badges, right, accumulating, and they're equating it literally to a mental disorder manual. They're like, this mental disorder manual is such a good model. We should have this for all of our learning, for this lifelong learning on the ledger. And the author of this piece, it was talking about Parchment, which is an alternative credentialing platform. The author is Natalie Smolensky. And you and I actually had a little bit of barbecue with Natalie Smolensky at the Texas Blockchain Summit, like introductory dinner. And she was the chair of at the time of the Texas Blockchain Council, and came up in Learning Machine with MIT, the blockchain transcript, which has now been sold out to Highland Credentials. So even though Greenlight is the blockchain operator right now in the Dallas space, there are many competitors that are coming in, and Natalie's more. Like clearly a major player. And this is just an image from a relationship map that I've made for Texas that has Natalie, and it talks about her work with the Blockchain Council, with Highland, their involvement with Hedera Hashgraph, and that actually her background She began, I think, at the University of Michigan, but then went on to the European Graduate School. And her dissertation work was in the area of psychology and religion, which is an interesting choice for someone who's operating in this blockchain identity space. But really, they're interested in creating twins. They want our psychological profiles. And they've actually, Natalie has been working at a global level on a report about blockchain in higher education development. So that was just.
And it's so interesting that you came across that. The fact that we met her, and then my friend Meg, who's going to be on the next show, she sent me that Twitter video of Natalie. She almost looked and sounded like a robot talking about this future. And so just interesting that we had barbecue with her and in Texas, in Austin that day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
a Swiss-trained cultural anthropologist with a focus on phenomenology and clinical psychology and psychiatry, right? But she's working on this global report for the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that it's, according to this, it spans 37 member countries and 80% of world trade and investment, right? So these are the guiding forces behind this that most parents, again, while they're caught up in certain narratives, they don't know the other pieces that are going on behind the scenes.
Right, because they think that this is the future innovation and their children will be gathering skills for this future. And so it will make them more marketable, and thus, they'll have a good income for the future. But as you mentioned, when I work with unemployed people, I've been seeing this trend of the piecemealed work, where they're freelance here, they're doing Uber there, they're trying to piece together an income, and it's fragmented. And there's really they're thinking that they're going to eventually establish some sort of consistent work and be able to plant their roots and actually work for a company for a few years, maybe get a retirement. But you're saying that with this plan, none of that exists in the future.
No stability.
No stability.
So, what does that do for our communities when people aren't able to plan, figure out where they're going to put down their roots, have a family? Like, society starts to fall apart. We're all independent agents, which is this complex adaptive systems. We're agents in their game, really. And so you're
saying it's like a simulation, and we're all being fed into it. And they use the captive market of the public school students to feed this market because they need enough coders and enough participants in order to build out this metaverse, this future that
build it and defend it. Because then there's the whole cybersecurity. So we're building a virtual simulation that is inherently flawed and a shadow of the actual version of our life, but it can be much more closely controlled for certain outcomes. So,
and I think that is why they talk so much about outcomes. And for those who don't understand this agenda, then you would think, oh, well, we want positive outcomes. We want students to perform well, or we want them to do well, or develop these skills or those skills. But what you're saying is these outcomes are for a world that you and I say we didn't give consent to. Exactly. And most people, I think, if they knew what you are saying and what you and I know, they would reject it. And so that is part of our call to action, is to say, when you see these things being introduced, question them. Is this really what they are saying it is, or is this for some other purpose? And there are people all along the way who don't even know that they're part of, you and I talk about this a lot. Do they know what they're doing? Are they aware of this, or do they not know what we don't tell them? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Very much a planned workforce pipeline. And I think on the conservative side, people imagine that a planned workforce comes from more of a socialist leaning, or sort of, but the reality is that the future of work that they imagine is the robots. That's not coming from the government. That's coming from the new model of remote work, right? All of these multinational companies are looking to essentially get, at least on paper, according to skills badges, the best buy for their money for this temp workers, right, at the lowest price. And so it is going to be a global workforce. It's going to be globally managed. And so, but it is the government provides access and the training of the children into this future, but the future of work is literally being run by the global corporations, which again, most of them, they're global, they're multinational, they don't have roots in any one country to
so
really.
It's not really the government. So I think that you're right, because the right would say, oh, I want less government and less intervention and shrink government. But what happens is it's really shifting into the hands of the government, the public dollars, shifting into the hands of the corporations who then are planning this future of work. And I see it at the chambers. The chambers of commerce.
Yeah, exactly. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Yes, exactly.
And
like
local
hey,
chamber.
We don't want to feed our children's brains into robots. Thank you very much. Like whether that's the government's enabling it through the schools initially, or the companies who are going to use the AI to place people in these robot jobs. Like that's not a future that any of us, like I would assume most parents would agree to. Right. So, and it's interesting, the cell, because this is an image of a mastery transcript, and it's coming through the Mastery Transcript Consortium, which is the most elite private schools, right? And so what they do is they offer it in a private school setting, and then all of the underserved communities say, well, we want that too, right? Well, where's our mastery transcript, right? And so these wedges are essentially like soft skills. Here's Joseph Smith, an interesting name choice there, but he fosters integrity and he leads through influence, and he has
a different vision than that. Joseph Smith. Yeah. Well, wait, hold that thought. So when we come back, I want to talk more about that. We'll be right back. Okay, so we're back with Allison McDowell, and you were talking about Joseph Smith, a different Joseph Smith. So keep going on that.
So yeah, but it's all of these leadership skills, right? It's actually not, how did you do in calculus, or how did you do in, your literature class? It's these soft skills and it's a radial badge. And I just want to show these social traits are actually impact investment markets, which is something I think people who are very focused on like the social emotional learning side of things or the critical race theory side, they're missing the point that the engineered behaviors is actually a global investment market coming right out of Teachers College Columbia. Right. We're looking at doing behavioral interventions on children and having global investors invest in planned behavior change. Those are investors at the highest levels. Those are corporate investors in children.
And they're social entrepreneurs, like the head of the Commit Partnership and the head of the Virtual Learning Commission. So Todd Williams and Rex Gore are both social entrepreneurs. They're social impact and social innovation entrepreneurs. And I think people have a difficult time understanding what that means, but it requires all of this emotional data to feed this model, as well as the skills and the badges and the acceptance of this future of work that they're pushing. Right. So, okay, keep going.
The question is that, like, on the one hand, people might say, oh, there's a certain interest group that looks like this that's trying to brainwash my child into that. But what I would say is look at the infrastructure, because at some point it could shift. And would you be okay with your child being conditioned with these technologies into the way you think is right to think? Like the bigger question is, should we be engineering children's minds, period?
Either way.
Create these larger global markets in behavior management.
And I would say no.
Yeah, and these are radiographs of the big ocean 5 traits. So this is what you look like modeled as math in your behaviors. And then they're using these token reward systems to train the children, just like pigeon pellets. Comply, behave, we reward you with points that you can then redeem for privileges or benefits, and then move on. And then this behaviorist training is going to end up in something like Learn Card. And I know we're running short on time, but
yeah, I want to cover Learn Card, because that's a big one.
Okay, Learn Card, but yeah, well, you could store your points on your phone with your digital twin. But here's just a bit with again, this is the Heritage Foundation. This was back in the day. They're already pitching financial technology and choice. So this is from 2017, but they've known, like what the museums are up to, that the plan is to disassemble, create free agents, students as free agents in the free, quote unquote, free market of skill collection. But that skill collection is happening under surveillance. And this is just a slide that touches on LRNG and Big Thought in Dallas, the after school programs. When they get the vouchers, they're going to be set up to have interoperable data fed back into the system for the impact markets. And there we just
And I know that there was a big push for out of seat time learning, and that came through districts of innovation. And that was a piece that people didn't really talk about because they were taking the dangled carrots of the control of the calendar or teacher certification. You could hire a master welder or whatever. And so they didn't see that this was actually a way to get out of the seat time funding mechanism in Texas. But it's for this very thing that you're talking about, this learning outside in the community, and anytime, anytime, any place, any path, any pace learning through this model.
And there's going to be the part that's going to be online because, again, they need to cut costs and they need the data. So this is an image from Stimuli with the floating satellite eyeball over the gamified child, right? And what does that mean if you're actually your child is playing school in a game where they know that they're always under surveillance? Like, this is a conditioning mechanism. So
it normalizes the eyeball watching you, virtual or, whether you can see it or not. You're right.
Right, it's the telescreen. And so you're conditioned to that. So then when you go to check in at the library or the makerspace with your QR code and swipe, like, to me, I think some people on the conservative side for choice might feel like, oh, this is empowering. I've got one over on the government. Look at me, I've got my money, and now I'm an actor in the free market of education. But they're not realizing that these QR codes are all feeding the data back and aggregating it onto the digital profile of the child to be put like a puzzle piece into this future workforce where literally, like, are you playing a game or are you learning? They want to turn education into one giant game. And
they call it gamification, and you'll see that with a lot of the programs that are in the physical school buildings that the kids are using on devices. So some of this has been a slow boil, and it has normalized it, kind of like the guy that said it was the digital doggy biscuits. Well, yeah. Okay, so with Learn, so is that everything you wanted to say about Learn Card? And we've got a few more minutes, so I want to make sure that you get to say, some of your solutions and anything else that we haven't covered in the slides that we can put in there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mostly want to convey to people there is a larger picture. The larger picture is this remote work and using and building up a very granular profile of each potential worker, both their emotional state, because the world we're building is going to make people very emotionally fragile, and their knowledge base, knowing that the knowledge is going to be over and over. You have to keep learning because the AI is always going to be outpacing human learning.
So that's when you hear the term lifelong learning, it's not what the teachers really mean. It's what this future that they're trying to impose on us means. So it's like you have to keep moving through this simulation, through your learning and your earning, right?
Right. Yeah, and so this image is from Learning is Earning from Institute for the Future from 2016, I think. And this young woman is saying, like, so she is I'm assuming she's supposed to be in high school, and they send her protein folding puzzles, and she's so good at doing these online protein folding puzzles as citizen science that she gets paid and she gets credit for school, and now she imagines that she's a scientist because she's doing these gamified puzzle folding things. Now, is that the future that we want, where there's custom puzzles delivered to children that they perform online for money and credit, and then they imagine themselves as being trained as I think that's giving her false hope, in terms of what her conditioning is. That's not real education, and it's very isolating.
It is very isolating. I think that is what I've realized is in looking at my own children, and I know yours, is do we want this kind of future for them? I love to be able to use the technology. Of course, we would be hypocritical to say that we're anti-technology. We're not, but it's a very different, it's a very different use that you and I would think to use it for than what's being built around us with this push for the twinning, your virtual self, your physical self, and those two somehow being tracked and entered into this system that most people don't even know that is being built around us. So any other suggestions or closing thoughts that you want to leave us?
I would just try to encourage people to look at the bigger picture, because a lot of this is about managing very strong emotions. And a lot of it is about teams and self-identification, that they want to reinforce who's the good guys and who are the bad guys. And
it's the opposing, yes.
Of political ideology and theory. And I'm saying, I think if we zoomed back and we went all the way back to this idea of sustainable, efficient work that's through a robot, that you're doing cleaning work through a robot, is that the future that we want to leave our children into? And do conservatives do they want to lead the way into this? Because unknowingly they are walking this road right into the robot future.
That's right. Okay, well, we'll close on that. So I know that you really have done a good job of walking the walk as far as connecting with people in person and setting out your intentions for what you'd rather see, and using more of a natural approach to life. And so I'm really grateful for your friendship and the work that you do, the extensive research. We can find you on wrenchinthegears.com for all of Allison's research. And thank you so much, Allison. So good to see you.
Thank you, Lynn.
All right, then. Oh, here, let me see. I'm going to, hopefully that this is still working. I'm switching over. I'm just doing it on one laptop tonight because my secondary monitor seems to be messing up my hard drive. But before we close out, I thought I would take a minute, because I've been spending the last week or so making up a new map. And this one, as I mentioned on the lead-in, I've been focused on this idea of token engineering and the commons. And, with all of the discussions around crypto and regulation and fraud, I think it's really important that people start to examine the other aspect of blockchain. And this map has a lot more to do with smart contracts and Ethereum related products, and the way the plan is to create this layer of logic, of automated code, arbitration code within a cyber-physical system, right? The way we deal with one another in the world through these encoded contracts is really important. And the way in which that interfaces with the idea of democracy and the commons, and remedying these broken systems, right? Remedying the broken system of wealth inequality, remedying the broken system of corrupt politicians and stolen elections and fraud. But in fact, it's going to do nothing of the sort, and it's actually going to make us sort of pets of the AI, so to speak. And so one of the places that I went, I've been looking a lot more into block science, and I'm not sure, I think maybe Leo first put them on my radar. But the founder of Block Science, which is the red dot here in the middle, is Michael Zargham. And he actually was trained at the University of Pennsylvania here in Philadelphia, where I'm at. And he got his PhD in the engineering program, and did a lot with simulation modeling. And much of his PhD research was actually backed by the military, so the Army Research Office, and I believe the Navy as well. And then he while he was doing this work at Penn, he was also a consultant on humans, networks, technology, and data. So Mr. Zargham and his colleagues are very deeply involved with the planning of new tokenized economies and societies, really, and how those interface with optimization and simulation modeling, and the future of work, because much of this involves Web3, and it involves people doing remote work, TaskRabbit sort of jobs to build out this new digital empire. And ultimately, this idea is that through these tokens, which are actually signals, some of which represent something that we may commonly understand as money, and some of them may be represented as something we today understand as votes, but it's going to get a lot murkier, is that they're going to try to steer society. And I'm going to do another live in a bit, that I have a whole playlist of like 45 different 1 to 4 minute clips that's really talking about this new working model of building out the quote unquote open source metaverse as a digital public good, and how that's going to solve all of our problems. And then in doing that work to build it out, how we build reputations and not only reputation scores, but also we participate in that digital twinning process and the social steering process. So I've been doing some stuff with block science, and it all really goes back to blockchain. And it's framed around the commons, this token engineering common system that we. There are a lot of videos. I've been watching a lot of videos about algorithmic policy making and this token engineering commons ecosystem, and then the commons stack that is coming with that. And that's sort of the topic that Leo and Jason and I took up in that 2-part series about financing these digital public goods and how that would all happen. So I've been spending a lot of time on this, and as it happens, I ended up revisiting something called this blockchain futures map guide that I had seen probably 4 or 5 years ago. This was developed by Institute of the Future, which is based in the Bay Area. It actually dates back to the 1960s. It was spun out of RAND, which is sort of a military defense think tank. And in fact, I think one of the founders of the Institute for the Future actually developed the Delphi approach, which is sort of like steering meetings to a predetermined end and giving you sort of a sense that you participated, even though your participation was meaningless because they'd already decided the outcome. But looking at this blockchain futures document, which essentially was a map, let me see if I can pull it up. It was a map that featured like a 10-year time horizon. Let me see if, I can zoom in a little bit more. From 2017 to 2027, sort of their plans for blockchain. And I had actually done a long Twitter thread sort of breaking out this document around the health data space, that it's not just about, injections, what have you, like biometric health passports, but it's actually much more broad around wellness behaviors and social prescribing and managing people through their health data. And so, I was revisiting this again today, and, it was quite fascinating because when I was looking at it again, it's like stares you right in the face. The second the opening section that talks about how they're going to phase this in. I mean, I've read it many times before, but I didn't have the knowledge base to really see it for what it was. They say that there are 3 phases, okay? And I'll just read this out loud for people who might probably do this as a podcast or the audio for it. That blockchain infrastructure will unfold over the next decade. Now, again, this started in 2017 in 3 phases of transformation. So they have 3 specific phases. From new currency to new computing infrastructures to new ways of managing all kinds of commons. The commons idea is central. The governance of the commons. We need to shift from focusing solely on the money part and the central bank digital currency to broaden our understanding to the tokenization of everything, the securitization of everything as tokens, and then the moving of those tokens through social systems as a language that informs the AI. Okay? So the section goes on. The first phase, the phase of currency innovations, is still well underway. Even as cryptocurrencies and shared ledgers create more flexible alternatives for handling all kinds of financial transactions within and across institutions, communities, and nation states, wide-ranging experiments are underway to tokenize non-financial value exchanges, all right? And the tokenization of these non-financial values, that's what we need to be paying attention to. Identity, information, ideology, and strategy will all take advantage of crypto tokens to reweave the fabric of our economy and society. Right? So they're wrapping us up in the matrix, right? They're reweaving, they're going to tokenize things even down to ideology. All right. So this is the first phase was the money phase, but they have much greater ambitions. Okay. It continues. The second phase of the blockchain transformation is the build out of trusted distributed computing. As smart contracts insinuate themselves into blockchain transactions, they will form the basis of what is, in effect, a distributed protocol-based global computer, eventually displacing today's platform-based cloud computing. They will control the execution of blockchain transactions using immutable code that tracks the state of every exchange everywhere in the world at any given point in time. This is called stateful computing, and it will be the secure foundation of a truly automated, intelligent future. Okay, so when we're talking about digital passports, health passports, biometric passports, it is about pervasive computing. That is what this is about. This is about essentially creating an extended reality where data is overlaid onto the physical world and onto our relationships with one another, and that at any point in time, that information is aggregated, it is interoperable, it is distributed. And the trust piece is always about blockchain. And it's always been about that. So my very strong and firm position on the blockchain has always been, ever since I found out they were putting children on blockchain to build social capital, was that this was never really meant to be about quick, fast money. It was always the control grid and the language of human emotion, the language of human values, the language of human society that would be tracked through the token exchanges. And that's what's coming. So then the second phase is this distributed computing layer with the logic, with the trust. Okay. And that's essentially like the Ethereum space that I've been working on a lot lately. And then the last paragraph says the result of the first two phases will be a new model for managing not just information commons, but the physical commons. As the Internet of Things is connected to the blockchain via smart contracts and tokens, and tokens control the flow of value through it, crowdsourced infrastructure will take advantage of peer-to-peer networks to build and govern everything from distributed energy grids to self-managing public services, okay? And so in this, you have to always read govern now as cybernetics. It is the governance protocol is a steering mechanism. That is what the token economies are. They're a government surface to steer us and ultimately to steer us towards some optimized swarm intelligence. And I feel very strongly that this links in with Vernadsky and Teilhard de Chardin and Huxley's idea that and the Foundation for Integrated Education and Kunst and Reiser, that this world brain, the global superorganism, is what they are orchestrating through the token exchanges. And so all of the people who are really focused on who did what and who were the bad guys and who defrauded whom and what the regulations are and who will get central bank digital currency first, they're not yet in the headspace of understanding the smart contract layer of logic and the token exchanges as ultimately steering mechanisms for collective intelligence. And that was the title of the talk that I did with Lynn, was this collective intelligence experiment. Now, I would say I'm in Philadelphia, I'm in the East, we're a democratic city, we're very liberal, we have a left-leaning, groups. During the lockdowns, the Libertarian Party gained a lot of traction. And I'm sure it's probably not dissimilar in other large cities or other places that maybe considered themselves sort of liberal bastions, having a growing libertarian ethos relating to freedom and liberty under this heading. Now, what's actually, I believe, is going to happen is that these same freedom-loving people who especially many of them are aligned with the blockchain space, are literally going to grab their tokens and march off into persistent, pervasive computing in the digital twin land without even understanding what happened to them, right? And so that's the challenge of the narrative, is that on the one hand, you have some people in the resistance space who are very strong proponents of crypto or Web3 technologies. But this is the trap. This is the trap, and it feels very much like the conservatives and the libertarians are going to be on the bleeding edge of taking their stuff from the government and then walking off into the great beyond, which is going to be off the edge of Web3 and into the matrix. And they do, because they don't actually understand what the story is. And so this idea, again, 3 phases: currency innovation, distributed computing with a trust automated logic layer, and bringing those together to govern the information commons and the physical commons. And I will just say, regarding the information commons today, I've been backing up my talks to the archive.org, which is connected to the Wayback Machine. And it doesn't really get many views, but I thought it's a good place, and also people can download them because I'm not into making money on my content. I just want to put it out and share it with people and make it have an extra backup in case something happens. And so as it turns out, I guess the IEEE screen record that I did, and I posted it there as a backup, they took it down as a copyright claim and erased all of the 30 files that I put. They locked my account. There was no notice. They didn't actually say. The only way I knew was that I went back to the link I'd included in my blog. This is the IEEE Metaverse Congress, where I was the only non-panelist participant in there, asking some pretty pointed questions about their plans to essentially create a new living simulation. And so that's this space, right? They're talking about governing the commons in some democratic way, in some just way. But these are the same people who would literally disappear you with no notice. And that's the world that we're going to be living in. Is they talk a good game. They talk a good game about making the world a better place, but ultimately it's conditional on demand. And it is the 1984, right? The memory hole. If you run afoul, one misstep, all right? And I don't even think that webinar was copyrighted. That webinar wasn't copyrighted. I mean, if anything, my intellectual property of adding all of my comments, that was my intellectual property. But they disappeared that because they don't actually want regular people to know what's happening. And they don't want regular people to know about the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers, because they'd much rather have people focused on Klaus Schwab. They'd much rather have people focused in a very obscure fairy tale of what this is, rather than the nuts and bolts of how it's actually happening. And, I'm just going to put a call out again. I keep begging people, we need to be a lot clearer about the particulars of decentralized finance, regenerative finance, how this presents, how it's going to interface with the governance layer, with cybernetics and democracy. And I know Sebs has been doing some work in this area, and it's much appreciated. And I know Leo is continuing to do some research into the agricultural sector phase, and I'm going to have a follow-up it's such a deep dive. It's hard to know when to stop and take your breath and share it back out. But this token economics and how it relates to Tucson and my time in Arizona is going to be coming. But we need more people. And listen, I'm not a coder. I'm not somebody, I hated math, was my hardest subject. I never took physics. Math and science, I'm an art history person, but I'm stepping it up to figure these things out because it matters. And actually having clarity around the story matters, because I'm just so glad that I'm off social media, because occasionally I'll poke into Twitter and look some of the people in the maps, all they had was a Twitter page, and I'll just look at what's out there, and it's garbage. It's polarizing garbage. I mean, large sections of it, people are so lost in their reactive emotionality that they can't actually look with any clarity about what's happening. And that's what we need. We need people with take a deep breath, invest of yourself to have your own knowledge base of what this is, and then share it out. So, and again, I'll just say thanks to people who've been also submitting some things to the blog for looking around the labyrinth. We have a new one on the blog from Moab, Utah, which is awesome. So I'm just going to go back to this little map here. These were also from the map itself. So these were this went along with the phases. So currency, the bullet points under the currency innovation was low friction financial transactions. Okay, so yeah, that's in the process, right? Wallets for the unbanked. Now, that's very central to the work that I had done on the conditional cash transfer in Mexico, and also Leo's work with Cello and the refugees, is getting the digital identity and getting leapfrogging, right, the global south into the Web3 world, because they need to get the people onto blockchain so that they can take advantage of them, both for their human capital assets and then also their natural assets that they're embedded in. The lands and the communities in which they are situated are going to be valuable for these natural asset classes. So the wallets are important. Community tokens. So they want community wallets, right? They want to frame this, again, the swing back is going to be from jerky libertarians to, social justice progressives, right? Oh, we can use this is just a tool, right? It's just a tool. We'll use our tokens for the community, right? We've got social scores right here. Now, I would say, again, these social scores are not the Chinese social credit score. In fact, many of the social scoring is going to be about reputation modeling in the remote workspace, right? You build up. It's not just about carbon trading. It's not just about managing your purchases. Literally, probably the more important part is that you have a digital identity, and when you log in to do your education work, when you log in to demonstrate compliance with your health protocol, when you log in to do your gig jobs on this platform labor, you are building a reputation that others will judge you by in the virtual world. And that's how it works. So it's not going to be just punitive, right? They're going to say, do you want to live in this new world? Then we need to know who you are. We need to know that. And that's your social score. And then the insurance, again, Leo has focused a lot on the insurance, especially agricultural, micro-credentials, that has everything to do with what I just said about school choice and digital vouchers. Health scoring, again, that's the Medicare for all and the single payer, that when we get that, that's coming with your electronic health records from Zeke Emanuel and pulling it all together for your medical digital twin and universal basic income. So these are all things that we can now see are well underway. I think if you'd ask a lot of people about this 2-3 years ago, most people would have no clue. But this has ramped up so quickly in the last couple years. Okay, so then the second phase is the computing part. So the bullet points for this are crowd computing and storage, on-demand employment, self-correcting production, automated innovation, and smart profiles for health services. So I would say, like, the crowd computing and storage, this is really important. Filecoin, I think, is in this interplanetary file system, is like on the leading edge of that. They have to figure out where to put all the data. They need the data and they need the computation. I have concerns about the way in which of in vivo deployments of both possible computing and storage applications in, maybe not necessarily people for a while, but they've definitely already done DNA data storage in bacteria. And that's coming, and that's something that actually the IEEE, the incoming president, he said he didn't know anything about that, even though there's numerous articles about it over the past year, and his expertise is in data storage. So he seemed very shocked that I would ask about in vivo uses of DNA data storage, and yet it's already, that horse is already out of the barn. On-demand employment, that's again the remote work based on your reputation, based on AI sorting. Production, that's the supply chain. Automated innovation, again, optimization through digital twinning, not just of people, but of entire societies and of machines and of human-machine collaborations. And then the health services. And then I'll just close up lastly with the commons, governance algorithms. So this is something that I'm going to go into in more detail about these planned token economies, testable governance algorithms, self-managing utilities, cooperative ownership. So there you go. That's the circular economy. That's the sharing economy. Coordinated allocation, self-owning devices, transparent budgeting for communities, crowdsourced legislation, and values coded in market incentives. So this is a future where there is no nation state anymore. Now, again, I don't consider myself a nationalist per se, but I think the globalization, the globalist framing, I think it kind of obscures the fact that the globalists are really about Web3. like the metaverse smart contract layer, that is globalization 4.0. And it's a little bit different than sort of the, people getting their, people making the baddies out to be the globalists, right? Like there's some super villain, right? Literally, the globalist concern that we should all be addressing is the smart contract layer. That is the next phase of globalization. That is your testable governance algorithms, your resource allocation, the cooperative ownerships. We are going to, the plan is that we will be digital twins and we will be digital citizens. And our embodiment in a particular geography is going to sort of be relegated to your geolocation data for the social impact finance deals they're gonna like base off of your activities. Like they want to disembody us as we are embodying we are using our data to allow the robots to become embodied, the AI to become embodied through humanoid robotics, even as we are losing ourselves to the cloud. So I guess that's it. The one last thing I do want to, I added this bit over on the map today. It's, remember Glenn Weil, Microsoft's Octopest, and he has a colleague, Divya Siddharth. They're both at Microsoft. And Divya has been working on something called the Meta Governance Project, which is a governance layer for the internet. And I know a lot of us have been hearing about these sign-ons for the internet, and because the internet really is the new empire, the new world. But one of the people, there are a number of principal investigators for this project, and I'm just looking. This woman that I added today, her name is Primavera Di Filippi, and she's at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, but she's based in Europe, in Paris, and her focus is blockchain law and global governance. But she also considers herself an artist. And she's part of the Creative Commons and the Peer-to-Peer Foundation. But it says here in her bio from the Berkman Klein Center, as an artist, Primavera Di Filippi, she produces mechanical algorithms that instantiate her legal research into the physical world. So she makes things with these to illustrate the blockchain laws. And one of the things that she was promoting is this idea of a plantoid, a blockchain-based life form. So this is the website for this plantoid, which is a blockchain-based life form. And it's saying that these plantoids have a physical body that's an electromechanical contraption that simulates the appearance of a plant. And when it enters into contact with organisms in the physical world, like people who might display some form of appreciation to it, usually by sending it a small donation, the plantoid might awaken into a dance of music and lights animated by a mixture of mechanical greed and gratitude. Her website says that the spirit of the plantoid, its soul, only subsists in the digital world and is represented by an autonomous software agent that lives on the blockchain. This is what constitutes the actual soul of the plantoid, since the physical body is a means to connect its inner logic with creatures in the physical world. That the goal of the plantoid is to reproduce itself, and it does that by enticing the curiosity of people it encounters with its physical beauty, and lures them into feeding it with some cryptographic money to awaken it and contribute to its ongoing reproduction. And the contributions are Bitcoin. And it says once a plantoid has proven its worth by accumulating a sufficient quantity of Bitcoin, it will enter into the reproductive phase, initiating a procedure whereby it will look for mates, humans, willing to help it in the process of reproducing. So it will essentially set up a task and hire an artist to make an offspring for this thing. Now, I mean, this is real. These are very serious people who are coming up with ideas that in many respects feel rather occult, and we're going back to the soul-bound token paper. That was a name that was chosen with some intention, right? And I spent some more time looking into Ethereum, that's the basis for the smart contracts, and Ethereum Foundation, they provided a lot of money to a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, to help it develop into this ETH 2.0, the proof that this merge from the proof of work to the proof of stake to fund projects that would help facilitate that transition to make the smart contract layer more scalable. And that entity was actually called Moloch Ventures. And they kept referencing the god of coordination, that these tokens aren't about greed as much as they are about, well, potentially leveraging people's greed, but in terms of tagging them and swarming them and steering them to a certain end that we are not having agency over. And evidently this Moloch DAO was inspired by Allen Ginsberg had an essay about meditations on Moloch. And then that poem was included in an essay by Scott Alexander in 2014. And somehow that was the inspiration for this DAO that is facilitating the merge. But this isn't just, some goofy punk rock people in the garage, goth people who are like having a funny joke, naming their business venture after a character in the Hebrew Bible, a bull-headed idol of child sacrifice. This is a very serious business, and it plays a role because these smart contracts, that's what LearnCard was behind Lynn the whole time, this LearnCard project. So I'm going to spend a lot more time on looking at Ethereum and consensus and Gitcoin grants and the commons and all of this swarming behaviors. And I've talked a lot about Ocean Protocol before, these AI data marketplaces. And you know what, I'm gonna see, maybe I had one clip that I added today and I'm just looking for it. It was about DAO Stack. So maybe let me see if I included, I didn't include the video. That's gonna have to wait. It's going to have to wait for next time. So, okay. Well, hopefully people are still along with us today, and you found this interesting. And I appreciate everyone who's hanging out on a Friday night with me, looking at the tokenized commons. I'll just finish up now. All right. Bye bye, everybody.